Hey guys, what's going on? This is Adamar46. I am the founder of the subreddit R Grand Prix Travel, and today we're going to be talking about the Monaco GP and the Montreal or Canadian GP. This is the latest episode of Know Before You Go. Joining me today, we've got Greg with FanAmp.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Happy holidays. We're celebrating this weekend.
Yeah, happy Easter all.
Yeah.
Let's see. So today, for the Monaco GP, I ended up, so my wife and I, we had kind of a long plan for our kind of a big anniversary scheduled, or it was supposed to happen in 2020. And we bought the tickets in 2019 and had planned for a couple of years, like this is the year we're going to go to Monaco. And so we bought the tickets 2019. We had everything booked, flights, hotel, or Airbnb, everything planned, and then COVID happened. And so I still have like unused tickets from a race that never happened. It's the only time the Monaco GP has not taken place since 1950 or so. Yeah, and so I have tickets for that race sitting in a drawer somewhere. It's kind of a souvenir at this point. But so I didn't want to reschedule everything for 2021 because at the time everything was still up in the air as far as tourism and restrictions on entering the country. And so I ended up, everything was so last minute for the 2021 Grand Prix. I pushed everything to 2022, and I was able to use some of the I guess some of the bookings I had were non-refundable. And so I just kept rolling over and rolling over to 2022. So we went last year and we had just an incredible experience. It's the Monaco GP. It's not the greatest racing. It seems like, I mean, most of it is qualifying. That's the big day. And really, I got there on Tuesday, and it's mind-blowing how they just cram this circuit into this city that it doesn't make sense. And seeing it in person, it just like mind-blowing as that, like, this is actually happening. This is real. This is a thing, and it's been a thing forever. And we kind of lucked out, and we were able to plan ahead, and we stayed about a 5-minute walk from the casino square. And overall, it's just a great experience, and it's something that it takes a little bit of planning, but it can be done pretty reasonably. Because it was a big trip for us, we did kind of splurge a bit. We did some hospitality one day type of thing, and got tickets for the grandstands and different sections each day too, which was pretty cool.
Let's see. And I think it's worth just like sort of setting the stage of the place itself, right? Because I've never been to that specific race, but having been to Monaco a couple times, it's just such a unique environment. Like we've talked before about the city races or park races, but like this is sort of this weird anomaly almost, right? Because you have this harbor that you're set with everything against, and these like the view is just insane. And I think the spectacle, the opulence is such a key characteristic of like what this race is. And one other thing that like I find really interesting about it is like the number of laps actually could work to your advantage as a fan, even if it's not overtakes, but you get more opportunities to see a car for every seat that you're in, which is kind of cool.
And then you never know if it's going to rain.
Fair. Yeah. Well, I feel like Canada's probably going to be the one that's a bigger variable for than this one.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I lucked out the year that I won. It rained and it caused a really interesting race. It was still a bit of a procession as far as overtaking, but the race itself was awesome. I had a blast. So let's see, the overall vibe at the race is pretty, the circuit itself is laid out along the harbor. So you have grandstands in some key areas. The biggest one is probably going to be Grandstand K, which is facing the harbor away from the city. And so you don't get a lot of that backdrop because most of the view is behind you, but you can see the cars coming out of the tunnel and through the, I forget what that chicane is called, coming into the harbor. and then you get to see all that whole like short straight as they go to the back corner and into the swimming pool. And it's probably one of the more expensive seats, which is surprising because you can get a ticket for pit lane and where you get the garage views for a similar price. I don't think it's very much different. But Grandstand K has probably the most accessible as far as being able to find tickets for. Then right after that is probably the, well, I guess what's the next favorite is Grandstand O, which is at the center of swimming pool. Right there, you have N, O, and P. N and P are pretty short. You don't get much elevated views, but Grandstand O, I was able to get the top row on that. And I could see everything from Tebak Corner through the exit of swimming pool onto the Grandstand T area. I sat there for qualifying, and that's where you can really see the cars push under both the first chicane into the swimming pool, and then hard brakes where Danny Rick crashed out, and then Mick Schumacher crashed out right in that section on the race. It's pretty cool to see, and it's kind of got a fun vibe. You have to take a couple bridges, and it's a bit of a zigzag pattern to get to that section, and that's where Monaco as a circuit, you can't really, when the track is closed and the streets are closed, you can only access your section or your kind of grandstand area, and so you aren't able to just walk around the circuit and watch the cars. Even walking to your circuit, when you get to Grandstand O, you walk behind T, or like kind of underneath T, and you walk along the edge of the harbor, and the marshals are kind of directing you not to stop and take photos. They kind of yell at you to keep moving because they don't want people standing right along the fence. They want you away from where there could be potential accident because everything is just so compact on how they fit everything.
And so what does that mean for the atmosphere of the city? Because I remember walking through the streets and there really is no space because everything's sort of set within this cliff, or well, not a cliff, right, but a very steep hill. And so it feels very tight. So like, what does that mean in terms of getting around in general?
So getting around is pretty easy. It's you just need to be prepared to walk like uphill constantly. That's what it feels like. There's that saying of like uphill both ways. Well, it's like it kind of is because it just I mean, there's public escalators, public elevators around town, but it's just when the track is closed, it's hard to get near the circuit. You can't really see anything without a ticket because they use a lot of the nearby roads as service roads, so they all get fenced off, closed off, and there's advertisements all over everything. So without a ticket, there's maybe one spot that I stumbled across that you can see from like super elevated view, and you can only see one tiny section of the circuit, which right in front of K. But it's really hard to get near the circuit because of all the service roads required to move kind of Formula One's infrastructure and marshals around during the track closure. But as far as walking around Monaco, it's pretty easy. There's a lot of foot traffic at leaving the train station at the base of it because the train station itself is kind of in the middle of a mountain. And so when you get out, you have to take an elevator up like 6 levels, or you can take a couple of escalators and go down, and it kind of dumps you out right there by like the turn 1 area. But that's where some of the paths get kind of congested and blocked, and you can't just exit as you would a normal train because it's all lines to get out of the train station through the bag checks and then into like what is the track, when it's just kind of like public streets, but they check your bags and they check your tickets to make sure you're an attendee. And so getting closer to the circuit is where you really kind of need to show your ticket. And it helps to have a lanyard because you're going to have to show your ticket several times just to get to whatever section you are.
So it feels like for this race, it's one of those where you're not really going to be wandering around outside or even when you're in there, right? Like it's not like a campus vibe. It's much more go to your seat, sit down, enjoy the race, but you're not going to be moving around.
Yeah, exactly. And there's amenities around where if you're at K, there's this whole if you're at T or K, there's a lot of bridges to get to that section that you have to cross, like the you cross over the start straight, and to get to your section, you have to walk through Monaco like kind of neighborhoods, but there's a lot of restaurants, bars, street vendors. The streets are just filled with all kinds of booths, as well as the like merch, and so you can just hang out at a restaurant right before you go to your seat. And to get to that area, you have to show your ticket a couple of times. But then walking around, it's just like any other busy day in Monaco, where the restaurants are open, the little shops are open. You can find some random stuff to kind of hang out near your section. So taking food and stuff is a good idea, but it's pretty easy to be able to get a meal, or at least something that you can eat standing up if there's lines and stuff. Kind of like pizza or a sandwich, things like that are pretty easy to get around the circuit area.
And you can bring in like a water bottle, for example, metal water bottle or plastic.
So I usually just take plastic water bottles. Security wasn't too heavy as or I guess invasive is a better word for their bag checks. It was more so just looking for alcohol and glass. And so I think as long as you don't have anything, any glass, they're not really gonna. I don't know. They won't dig any further. I don't think. And you can take food. I usually carry a cooler in my backpack, and I freeze some plastic water bottles, and I use them as ice. And so I keep I keep I don't know, like meat, cheese, fruit, some basic stuff that can kind of just carry through the day. And then in between sessions is when you kind of go down and get something a little bit more substantial, like a sandwich or things like that. But you can you're not going to get turned away at the gate for bringing food in. It's allowed. So
and actually, depending on some of the seats you have, like I know GA, we'll talk about it in a minute, but general admission is not a big part of the circuit. But for that, you can bring cushions or chairs, depending on where you're sitting.
Yeah, which most of the seats are kind of bleacher style, or they have it's not like Grandstand T is kind of like a bleacher base, but it's kind of got like a seat where it's plastic and it's a little bit more comfortable compared to just a metal bench. But it does help to have a cushion.
And we actually had a clarification from Andy, who's watching, who was saying, did you say that we should be laminating your tickets or putting them in a lanyard, or is it something else?
I think the lanyard holder that they sell at the all the ticket booths. It's just a basic insert, like a plastic insert that you can put your ticket in. That way you can take it in and out. And especially if you have a different ticket for each day, it just helps to take it in and out. I don't think you need to necessarily laminate it. But yeah, one of those ticket holders, they're usually like €3 or €4. They can help quite a bit.
Yeah, maybe don't buy it like immediately outside the venue, because I'm sure you'll get something a little bit more than you have to pay. But
well, so they what's cool about Monaco is that they have like pop-up ticket booths from the actual ACM, and they can they sell basically what they sell at the souvenir shops, or is an option when you buy your tickets. You can get the that lanyard for just a few dollars or euros. But the prices usually aren't too bad.
Cool. So this might be a good segue into like the piece on tickets in general. But there's like, where were you sitting when you were at the race?
So I had different sections each day. I got to Monaco on Wednesday, and I kind of walked around, scoped it out, and just explored the circuit because it's public streets whenever the track action isn't happening. And on Thursday, they did Formula 2, the Porsche Super Cup, free practice and stuff like that. So I actually sat at, I was able to get a ticket at Grandstand B for, I think it was like €25. It was fairly cheap. And it's only an afternoon. It's not a full day that they close the circuit, because it's not Formula 1 on track that day. It's only the support races getting some practice in. And On Thursday, I sat at Grandstand B, which is right next to the casino, and that has a pretty good view. You see the cars kind of at high speed coming up, making their way up the hill and going around the casino area, and they hang a right and then go down towards the Fairmont Hairpin, and then because you could buy a different ticket each day. On Friday, one of the big things that my wife and I had planned was to do a yacht kind of hospitality ticket for free practice because the price is way less than watching from a yacht for qualifying or the race. And so we paid about 900 euros per person. And we got to hang out on a yacht at Tabat Corner, which is in between, if you're looking at the circuit map, it would be between K and the section Z general admission. And so that yacht itself had, I mean, it had a private or a personal like chef that lived and worked on the boat, and so we had a full catering meal on the boat. It was pretty awesome. And as soon as we get there, they're greeting us with champagne and beer, and everything was open bar. And the staff, everybody was really friendly, and they let you just kind of hang out, enjoy the boat, and just eat and drink whatever you want all day. And they just constantly offer you food. There was both hot and cold food throughout the day. They had a dedicated lunch that was hot, and then they left some cold food out throughout the day, kind of help keep you from getting too drunk.
Which is probably important because also it's very hot, very sunny. Usually,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
In terms of the experience, so the thing that's kind of unique about it is we were saying before, there's limited GA. The Rocher, what you can see on the top left there in the image, the hill, first come first serve, very steep. Basically, you want to be camping out or there incredibly early in the morning to be able to get space once it opens up. And I think a lot of people I've seen have like locked their chairs against trees overnight to hold their spots. So if you're able to get it, great. And the tickets are usually like 70 euro, maybe for like the first day. And then they can make up to like 200 euro towards the end. But then the experience sort of scales up from there. And I think there's a lot of unique experiences. Like you said, a lot of the packages are like a multi-day where you have a different grandstand each day, or you have like a grandstand ticket on Friday and then qualifying and the race are on a rooftop, for example. And so there's a lot of really cool experiences. And then obviously the yachts, like which typically dot the harbor and you're probably not going onto, but this time you actually get to buy a spot on that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and so there's some hospitality companies out there like Senate Grand Prix. I was able to buy a single day. That's what's cool about Monaco is you can really piece together whatever kind of experience you want because they sell tickets per day per section, and you do get a discount when you buy from the circuit if you buy 2 days or more. I think or if you buy a Saturday Sunday, they give you 10% off. And so the next, like you said, the next tier up from general admission would be the grandstands, and at this point, I believe they might all be sold out for Sunday, but there's still some tickets available for Thursday F2, Friday, and Saturday.
Yeah, and
the prices range quite a bit, but they're, between around 800 to 1400 for some of the high end stuff.
Yeah, and that's in euro, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the yachts, I think, were around 22 to 2500 or somewhere. Or sorry, well, they obviously scale well beyond that, but starting price is around $2,000 to $2,500 for a 2-day package usually.
That might be per day.
Okay.
Yeah, for a full weekend on a yacht, you're looking at several $1,000s. And around two to three is probably about the going rate for Saturday, and you're looking at probably 3 to 4 minimal for Sunday. And then there's a lot of the hospitality companies that also sell. They host events inside some of the like hotels and things like that with balcony access, and that's where you can get like what we've got categories as the rooftops.
Yeah, so worth like looking in advance if you know you're going to go and buying one of the packages early on and just securing that. Well, it's the cheapest it'll be.
Yeah, I've also had a friend in the Miss Apex podcast Slack group who told me that he went to Monaco without tickets a few years ago, and he ended up speaking to somebody with clipboards who had some open availability to get into some of the hospitality, and so he was able to hang out for a day on one of the balconies overlooking the race.
Hmm.
But yeah, some of that stuff, it might be hard to come by now with all the hype and following that Formula One gets now.
Well, to that, we had a question about from Greg about, can you go in and out of the track between sessions? Like, do you have that flexibility? Could you poke your head out from a grandstand and from time to time and check in?
So it depends on your section whether you actually need to do that or want to do that. But I believe you can, because depending how far you get, sometimes I'm going to say traffic, but it's just people. It can get a little hard to move around, where you can leave and go to like a restaurant and get lunch, but at the same time, you might not get very far before you have to turn around and get back and wait in line to get back into the circuit. But I believe that you can leave, but I didn't have to do so just because I had like food on me in my bag, and then we were able to just kind of take advantage of the food vendors underneath our grandstands in each section we were at.
And what about the disability access? Like, given the whole setup of the city and some of the inconveniences of things like those grandstand seats, like, were there a lot of accessibility options that you saw?
So I didn't really see any, but I know that there are some specific platforms within some of the bigger grandstands that do have accessibility, like limited areas. And so I believe the circuit has specific tickets that you can buy along with like the accompanying person to have access to these sections.
Cool. All right. Should we jump to like, how do you actually get to the circuit?
Yeah.
All right, let me change this. So where is Monaco?
Monaco is the little hidden gem. It's the nearest airport is going to be the airport in Nice, which is actually in France, but it's pretty well connected. There's a ton of international flights to the area or to that airport that you can get to Monaco from pretty easily. The Nice airport itself has a tram connection that'll get you into Nice proper, even though the airport feels like it's right in the middle of the city. But it's easy to get from the airport to Nice, where you can then connect to one of the like regional train stations, and you can catch a train to Monaco, which is probably about a 25 to 30-minute ride. So in total, you can probably get to Monaco by public transport in about an hour, maybe a little more, depending on connection times.
Yeah, but I think the fact that you are so close to Nice is actually a big bonus because, you know, the cost is one of the things that you mentioned a bit with the seating options. Having access to a city like that, something that is only 25 minutes away by train, you can balance some of the affordability.
Oh, definitely.
Have a lot more plethora of hotels or Airbnbs or anything else.
Yeah, so because the train ride is actually not too bad from Monaco to Nice back and forth, it only costs about €4, and the time isn't bad. The only thing you have to worry about is the crowds, and so it's very reasonable to stay in Nice. You can probably find a hotel or Airbnb for around €100 a night on race week. Whenever we went, we stayed in Nice for I think 4 days before we went to Monaco, and I had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath Airbnb for €90, and it was in the kind of the historic city center of Nice, and it was well connected by trams, and we were able to take a train, or France also has Uber, so we were able to get around to pretty much anywhere pretty reasonably. But staying in Nice would be a really good option to to find something a little bit cheaper compared to staying in Monaco for the Grand Prix.
And then there was one thing that you and I talked about in the past, which was the helicopter. And I know that I thought it was a kind of a cool way or cool experience that you can have here. You mind sharing a bit more about that one?
Yeah, so there's the Monaco heliport, which is pretty, like, if you watch any social media like videos or A Day in the Life of Charles Leclerc style stuff. A lot of these guys, you see them kind of get in a helicopter and get to the airport, fly in a private plane, and get to the next race. Well, the heliport offers public flights that you can either get a shared helicopter or a private helicopter, and you can get to the Monaco or from the Monaco heliport to the Nice airport in about 7 or 8 minutes. They range in price from about 200 to 250 euros per person. You can get a private helicopter for about 600 one way. So you can fit, depending on the weight, there's weight limits for both bags and people, passengers. But we actually flew from Monaco to the airport when we were trying to catch our plane, because moving around Monaco with bags can be kind of not hectic, but it can be just tiring and just mentally exhausting because it's constant hills everywhere. Your bags want to roll this way, then you got to roll your bag through brick road or brick sidewalk, and it's Europe at the same time, so a lot of the walking paths just feel kind of brick and cobblestone. And so we ended up, like I said, our anniversary stuff, we kind of splurged on a private helicopter, and we took it from Monaco heliport from the Monaco heliport to the Nice airport, just so we could catch our flight without having to deal with lugging our bags around. We had 4 bags. We were in Europe for about 10 or 15 days.
Yeah, that'd be a lot.
Yeah, and
the trains are like pretty hectic, especially after the races.
Yeah, and so luckily that company I booked the helicopter through, they actually picked up our bags in the morning and drove them to us, and they were waiting for us at the airport.
So you save on the weight too.
Yeah, it's just pretty easy to do. You're paying more convenience, but also the views on a helicopter are just incredible. I mean, you're flying over Monaco. You're right along the beach coast the whole way, and it's just mountains. I mean, that's an experience of its own.
Yeah, that's awesome. Should we talk a bit about the ambiance, the environment, what you can do outside of the race itself in the city?
Yeah. So in the evening, after the circuit or after track action ends, the circuit actually opens, and it's a full-on public street with traffic and just people walking everywhere because everybody wants to walk the track. And so you get to get up close and see some of these iconic corners. There's still rubber bits laying around. I mean, it's pretty cool you don't get too much opportunity to actually walk an F1 track, let alone in Monaco. And so the street over by the harbor by Raskas, as you see in the picture, kind of turns into a club in the evening, and they're just blaring just loud music, and it's just a fun vibe. You will have to pay a cover to get in. I don't remember how much it was. It was probably only like 10 or 15 euros to get in, and the beers are reasonably priced. Drinks aren't too bad. But yeah, you'll notice that a lot of orange around, and it's a lot of the marshals having a few beers after work.
So nice. Hopefully they didn't pay the cover. It would have been a bad work perk.
Yeah, I don't know what they do. And then sorry, go ahead.
One. No, I was just gonna say that the casino was another one because I remember having gone there. It's such a beautiful building, and being able to go inside is a really cool experience. I don't remember losing a lot of money, but it was definitely, no matter what, it's worth it. I think even if you can go or maybe take a chip on your way out. But I think it's a cool spot to go to. And then there was a set of restaurants in the area, like a neighborhood that you had been to.
Yeah, well, actually, we went to the casino also. And so one thing I wanted to kind of talk about on there is I was worried that I was going to be underdressed whenever I went there because they're pretty strict on dress code enforcement. And so I kind of had a bit of hesitancy, or I didn't know if my shoes were if they were going to turn me away. I have just like some on cloud running shoes, but they're all black. So it's kind of like they don't really stand out. They're not flashy, but you kind of need something comfortable walking around Monaco. And so I was worried that they were going to turn me away. I just had normal, just pants and a button up shirt and my on shoes, and they let me in. And yeah, you don't have to dress like super fancy. I think as long as you are presentable, kind of smart casual, they should let you right in. And don't be too intimidated on having to drop a bunch of money. You don't have to buy a drink. There's no pressure. The bars are cool and they make some really great cocktails. And I think you can probably expect to pay around 20 euros per drink. And for gambling, I think I exchanged like 100 euros, and I stretched that out for probably about an hour and a half, where just played some slots, played a little bit of roulette, and some what's the other game? No, I think it was mostly just roulette. We just kind of won a little bit. We weren't gambling heavily, but we were just kind of enjoying that. It's about 100 euros of admission, so felt like it was kind of worth it. But there was a guy in front of me who exchanged like 20,000 euros. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, I think that's how I've always looked at gambling, because I think I've always walked away in the red, and you just look at it like the entertainment tax. It's like you're going to go for the hour, have a drink or two on the house, and play a couple hands. And I think then if you go in with that attitude, you're not going to have a bad time.
Yeah, and also just walking in there, they had a Ferrari on display, one of Charles Leclerc's car from the previous year, just sitting in the lobby, perfectly lit for a photo. And so that is really cool. And it's just an old, like, iconic building that's been used to film a ton of movies. And hanging out outside, I saw 3 Bugattis driving around, tons of Lamborghinis, Ferraris. I mean, it's a car show outside that week. It's just ridiculous. There was a Batmobile parked outside, and it was moving because the next day it was parked somewhere else. So somebody was driving that thing, but it was like the old Michael Keaton full-on Batmobile that somebody drives apparently in Monaco.
They're showing off their toys. That's what it's for.
Yeah. And so the street that you mentioned, I can't remember the name of the street, but the restaurant, I had seen Charles Leclerc mention in an interview that one of his favorite restaurants in Monaco was Mozza. And so I was able to look it up and made a reservation. We had dinner there, I think on Wednesday, before the GP. And then we went back to the restaurant across the street, which I believe is the same owners. It's called Izakaya Koza. But we're hanging out there on a GP week, and then we realized that all these cars pulling up are crazy fancy, like Bugattis and Rolls Royce. I mean, you see random little Fiats that were like historic cars. I mean, it wasn't just a regular Fiat 500. It was like a 1955 Fiat, like mint condition. And it's just that alone is also a car show. And then some of the people that you're probably going to encounter, like we were having dinner at that Izakaya Koza, and Shaun White showed up. He got dropped off his whole like entourage with his wife and his whole crew, and they're just dressed in like fancy bright suits. They just had this aura around them, and I was like, who are these people? Didn't realize, oh, that's Shaun White, and he was sitting like 4 tables over from me having dinner. And
it's pretty cool.
It's kind of cool to just hang out, and the food was reasonably priced. It wasn't bad. I think we only paid like 100 euros for 2 people to have like a 3-course dinner with drinks. So it wasn't bad at all. Yeah. Some of those restaurants do have prefix menus on race weekends, so just kind of need to keep an eye out for that. But a lot of those restaurants you can make reservations for, and as long as you give yourself a little bit of time, you can kind of plan your evening around it and get out there and just kind of people watch, have some good food, because the food was great.
That's also another option. It's a good point, because even for the race, as an alternative to tickets, I know there's some restaurants that are doing like a lunch where you have a fixed menu, some alcohol, and you can sit and watch the race or whatever is happening at that time of day. And so that could be another option if you're not looking to buy or go all in on a grandstand ticket. You could do that as well. Cool. Should we touch on Canada and how that might differ from a race in the southern France region?
Well, let's talk about Nice a little bit, or just the area of Monaco, because before we transition over to Canada, Nice itself can be really affordable. Like you don't have to spend a ton of money, and same in Monaco. It's only specific areas on that exact weekend that can really get high in the price. But consider some Airbnbs or staying in France, because France is right down the street. There's no immigration, no passport checks or anything you have to go through. And so you can literally walk from Monaco to France and have a drastic drop in your price of accommodation. And so it's something to consider, and something that you can, like, the prices are very reasonable. And then Nice itself, you can, let's see, there's plenty of hotels. It's kind of a beach city, so it has a pretty laid back vibe. And yeah, overall, it's not as expensive as it's made out to be. I mean, the parts of it are, but it's really not. Like, I spent more money attending Miami than I did attending Monaco, for example. Monaco is just not a very expensive city in the grand scheme of it all. As far as just visiting, we stayed at an Airbnb it was a 5-minute walk from the Casino Square. I think we paid it was like $450 a night, so it was on the higher end, but it was a special trip for us, so we kind of splurged a bit, and it kind of minimized the amount of time it took to get around to the circuit and just walk around the restaurants and things like that. We were just a 5 to 10 minute walk from everywhere, really, and so it was just paying for some of the convenience.
That's a good point. Plus, like the way you said it, and even when I've been in the area too, like it was part of a longer trip, and so it almost is worth. You can already plan ahead. You go to Europe for the summer or for part of it, like a long vacation, and then you just stop off there. So,
Yeah.
And Nice is very accessible.
Yeah. I mean, Italy too, because you can take a train in the opposite direction from Nice and be in Italy in like 20 minutes. And there's some of the bigger cities where even if you have an hour commute by train, it's really not that bad.
Yeah. And you just plan ahead around the crowds, or like you did, right? You have dinner. And then you just be willing to leave later in the evening, and that could just be relaxing. So
yeah, you just need to be mindful of the trains leaving and not have, if you're depending on the train, don't have too late of a night, because they do stop at a certain time. I want to say it's hard to catch a train after like 10 p.m. It's a little bit early in the evening. And so that's where you will probably have to take a taxi, because they don't have Uber in Monaco. If you want an Uber, you have to walk to France and request it from there. Monaco has kind of a private taxi like service that they have. I think it's a government funded one.
Got it.
Government owned. But yeah, and then a ride by taxi to Nice is probably going to be around 70 to 100 euros. And it wouldn't be surprised if it surges because of the race weekend, and because they know that people are going back and forth. Or that's something that you kind of need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Is train schedules. Yeah. Just be mindful of it.
All right. So then with that, if you fly to the other end of the world and you end up in Canada, how does this race in your mind differ from what Monaco is, right? It's from what I know about it, it's in a park, it's near a major city. So those are somewhat similar, but it's not right in the heart of it. And Montreal is a very different feel than what Monaco is, just in terms of the general ambiance. So what's it like for you? How do you think about it?
So Montreal's, I mean, it's all French too, which is kind of funny that we're doing both together. But yeah, so the vibe itself, it's just like a modern urban city. Everything is pretty accessible with the metro, and overall the vibe at the circuit, it feels like a proper circuit. I know it's technically a street circuit, but I don't think it's really used for anything other than Formula One as far as the circuit goes, because the circuit is in a park. And so the park is open to the public whenever Formula One isn't there. And you can walk around or bike the circuit pretty much at any time, as long as the weather's right. But Montreal itself it can be, lately, a lot of people are or businesses and hotels are capitalizing on the success of Drive to Survive and Formula One. Where it is right now, and surging prices on a lot of things. And so if you book a hotel or your Airbnb or wherever you plan on staying, you need to try to book that as soon as the provisional calendar is announced, because that week is when everything just fills up. And if you wait on that, the prices just surge like crazy. And I know a lot of places now, they're upwards that were around $200 to $300 per night are in over $1,000 per night. If you try to look for something now, because there's not much available.
Which is funny, because Monaco, you're saying, right? Like even now you could book spots in Nice for a lot less money.
Yeah.
And it just shows you the contrast, the two.
Yeah, and so one thing about the tickets for Canada is they're probably I think general admission starts at around 250 for a 3 day, but you can actually get a grandstand for I think 270 or 290 for some of the cheaper grandstands, which is definitely worth it for especially for a circuit like Canada because it's all flat. There's no elevation, and so if you're not right up to the fence, you're not going to see anything other than a car flying by if the person in front of you is not taller than you. And so I don't really recommend general admission for Canada. If you want to go, it's more so about, or if you want to go as general admission, it's more so about the vibe, or you need to get there just really early and wait outside the gate to get to a spot. And then you pretty much need to hold down your fort with your group or a partner because it can, yeah, it gets really packed.
So in terms of the experience, before we do the sort of
Yeah.
race map, right? I guess these were the, if you put GA aside, like you said, there are three tiers to the experience. So you have the grandstand seats, and there's a lot of really pretty stunning views at various different points on the track. And then you have these interesting sort of middle ground terraces where you can sit and have a seated lunch and drinks while you're watching the action. And it is on a raised platform, but lower to the ground. And then you have these suites, which are starting to get into that like paddock club territory in terms of the experience. But like you said, right, like the grandstands start at a price that's very close to, if not at parity with the GA tickets. And so it's actually like a really interesting place to go. And everything's in the Canadian dollar. So if you have, if you're coming from America or from other countries where the currency is strong, it's actually an even cheaper experience.
Yeah, I think I paid around 650 US dollars for 2 tickets at the Turn 11 grandstand, which is right at pit exit, kind of by turn 3. Um, yeah, you can see it on the map right there. It's by the Senna S's. The view that you have from that area is really cool. You could see down the pit straight. You can see the garages a bit. You're kind of looking at pit lane, and so you can't really see um, kind of where the garages or which teams they are. You could just see the pit lane. You can see the cars coming out, and you see pit exit. Yuki Tsunoda crashed right in front of me during the race, a clumsy like cold tire incident. Um, but the view itself, there's a couple of sections that are sold a little bit more within Turn 11. I believe it's sections 1, 2, and 3, because there's a massive tree that blocks a lot of the view if you're in sections 4 through 8 or whatever. Kind of the section going towards the away from pit lane. I don't know what direction it is, but going towards turn 4, the more you sit towards that side of turn 11, you're probably going to have a tree obstructing your view, and you can only see when the cars are kind of along turn 2 and 3 in front of you. Then Grandstand 12 is also just a great view. The higher that you sit, the better. The way that the seat numbers are at Montreal is they're double letters at the bottom. So they start at AA, go up to ZZ, and then they switch to single letters. And so ZZ and row A are kind of at the center of the grandstand. And then it's A to Z to the top. And so the top row will be Z. It's a bit confusing, and there's not really a lot of explanation for that anywhere, but that's just something that we found as a community to try to help share the info. And
I'm trying to like picture it now. I have to be like more.
yeah, so if you have a double letter row, it's going to be on the bottom half of the grandstand closer to the track. And the best thing to do is just to be far enough back where you're above the fence line, because the fence can kind of obstruct your view when you're looking that way or looking that way. You pretty much only see what's in front of you if you got the fence blocking you. But the only downside to that section of turn 1, 2, 3 is that it can be a good walk. It's probably about a 40-minute walk from the Concord entrance, from the Concord Bridge, which is kind of situated near the metro. But there is a shuttle that can take you from the metro station over to the casino. And then from there, it'll shave about 20 minutes of walking, but it's still far. And you need to be prepared to walk probably at least an hour and a half total per day, just within the circuit of this solid walking. And that's on top of a lot of the paths are kind of narrow just because it's they cram Formula One into this park, and so a lot of the paths are gravel or dirt, and so if it rains, it's going to get muddy, and everybody's crowded, and so the paths are probably no wider than 10 or 15 feet at some of the wider parts. There's a few spots that open up, but then that's where they place a lot of the vendors, and so you're kind of walking in between all this stuff, and it just takes time. You just need to be patient and understand that it's going to take time to get from the gate to your section and plan for that.
What about maybe the getting to the actual track itself? Because this is located on an island to the east of the city. And you'd think that it's really close, very easy. And in part it is. But once so basically, I guess to set the stage is once you leave downtown, and the best way to get to the circuit would definitely be the metro. Once you end up on the island, so that Jean Drapeau stop, then you have to walk, like you said. So there's 2 footbridges, Cosmos or Concord. And then from there, you still have to figure out like which gate you're going to, and then find your way to your seat. So it has end up being a little bit of a trek, even though it is so close to the city, and you just want to be mindful of that and the crowds.
Yeah, and if you're kind of limited mobility, or if you're with a group of people, that it's not feasible to walk for an hour to get to your seat. Tickets at the hairpin. Any grandstand there has a really great view. There's a couple sections that they added recently, maybe last year, and I think they just started selling some more tickets. I think 46, 47. You can see on the map. They don't have as much of a view compared to the Lance Stroll Grandstand or 15, but those are not too far of a walk from the metro, and it's probably the easy section to sit at as far as accessibility. And to get to the circuit, the best way is probably the metro. You pretty much have to take the metro to get out there. The other option that has to be planned and typically booked in advance is the ferry. They have specific times from the old port of Montreal. It's a nice little ride. I mean, it's like 10 minutes, but you're on a ferry with 2 levels, so you can sit on the upper deck and just get a breeze, and it's kind of a unique experience. I did that on Sunday, and it was I think I paid 12 Canadian dollars each way per person. But it's nice to not have to kind of wait in line to get crammed into a crowded train to catch the metro back to Montreal downtown area.
Yeah, and it runs on a special weekend schedule, so it's every half hour. So just be mindful of that as well. Whereas like the metro, the nice thing at least is it's only 1 stop. And so I think the experience is generally rather pleasant. It's just like you're saying, it's going to be crowded because that is the way that people get on and off the island. And there really is no option for car drop-offs or anything like that. So it's really not advised to try that.
Yes. And the ferry, they sell the tickets a couple months in advance, and the peak hours kind of post qualifying or post race, they're going to be sold out pretty quickly. So that's something that you kind of, if you do want to try to take the ferry, you need to plan for that. Whenever the tickets do go on sale, and get them as soon as possible because they do sell out. And it's not something that the circuit really advertises. I think it's more of a local tip kind of thing. So hopefully I'm not sharing too much info from the locals, but I found it at some point, and it was a really good experience, and it's just something kind of different. And it's not, I'd rather do that and have it take longer than being crowded in a train for, even if it's just 5 minutes. I'd rather be on a boat, I guess.
Especially if it's a nice day and you're going to basically the same place because it's taking you right to Old Town.
Yeah, exactly. And then from there is probably, you can catch the metro within a few minutes walk and get wherever you need to go. But there's a bunch of restaurants around that area too, so there's plenty to do. On the walk tour from the old port area.
Yeah. So what about that experience? Like you're obviously being in a city. There's a lot of different programming that's going to be going on that weekend. Like what were some of the things that you were doing?
So Montreal's kind of the Canadian GP is kind of a kickoff to summer for the city, where that's kind of, they know that the weather's going to be good going forward, and so it's kind of the city's like opening party for summer. And so they always host a bunch of street festivals. The streets kind of close off, and a lot of the they don't allow vehicle traffic through, and so it's all pedestrians. A lot of bars and restaurants in the downtown area, and the university area is nearby too. And so there's a lot of just nightlife, everyday nightlife that's in the area. And they also have a lot of music festivals that coincide with that week because it's the start of summer. And so there's stuff themed around Formula One, and there was a music festival nearby where I was staying that I don't think it had anything to do with Formula One. It was just a music festival happening the same week. And so I could just hear loud music walking around the downtown area. And yeah, just a good party vibe, just a lot of really good food. The prices for food and kind of just going out and having drinks and stuff like that, it's not crazy priced. It's kind of the normal city. And so expect to pay, around 20, 25 euros or Canadian dollars for a meal per person. And drinks are not as expensive as what I'm used to in Austin. I think I would probably estimate around $6 or $7 for a beer. Compared to here, I went to a bar the other day and it was like $9 for a beer in Austin. And so I'm just kind of used to the higher end of things, I guess.
Come to New York and we'll drain your bank account.
Yeah, exactly. And so Montreal is pretty reasonably priced. The things it serves the most are going to be your hotels. But the food and things like that going out at night, I feel like it's completely reasonable for a major city.
Yeah. So the top two photos are from that like street festival, the Crescent Street Festival that goes on in that same weekend. And that's sort of just open. It's really cool to wander around for. And then one of the ones that I thought was really interesting and fun when I've been to Montreal before was the brewery tours. So there's 40 some odd craft breweries that are all around that city. And we went with a group, we booked a tour, and it wasn't like one of those like bar crawls. Like it was truly, you go and you learn about the specific beer that they're known for. You do a couple tastings and then you'd move on to a different location. And so if you're there and you have some time, even if it's after the race, it could be something really cool to try out and just see a different side of the culture there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I like to do whenever I travel somewhere new is I like to find a local brewery and they probably have some really good food. And if they don't, the other one does. So, yeah,
or it gets better as you go. So the food's better and better every time.
Yeah, it's just a good starting point for kind of the way I like to travel is I like to have a good beer and some good food. And then they're usually located in some pretty decent areas. And so that's usually something that I kind of, before I travel, I search breweries in the area and save them so that if I'm in this area, I know that I have these options. And then I'll cruise by and see if it's not too busy to get a table and just hang out for a bit. But the brewery tour sounds awesome too. I used to work at a brewery and that's my jam.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then we also ended up going to the New City Gas, which is one of the like big nightlife like club areas or clubs in the area in the warehouse district on the southern end of the city. And there's a ton of really big name acts that come through there. So that's definitely worth checking out. And like we've talked about with Miami before, buy those tickets in advance because it's definitely going to sell out. It'll definitely become very expensive, but you could probably clip a ticket for a reasonable price if you look early enough out.
And there's a lot of free stuff that's happening around the city too. Like they usually have a kind of a Formula One themed, like it's where they host watch parties and things like that. It's kind of like a fan fest. Usually around the Crescent area or Peel Street, I believe is the other street where they have some of the stuff. And to the circuit itself has the fan fest area. It's kind of underneath the bridge, the Concord Bridge, I believe. Near the entrance, they have a stage set up where they usually do some of the driver appearances, and they have a lot of vendors and like the pit stop challenge, the normal Formula One fan fest stuff, along with beer vendors and things like that. But you'll see some post-race concerts there to kind of wait out the crowds for the Metro, where you can go hang out. And it was just kind of a big vibe after the race, kind of just a giant party in the park. It was pretty cool. If I didn't have my ferry scheduled, I would have checked it out, but I had to walk back to the ferry because I had pre-bought that ticket. Or else I was going to miss it. But also just needed I had a bunch of beers that day, so I needed to get some food and kind of get away from the crowds a bit.
That's why it could be good to ride the Metro.
Yeah, exactly. There's pros and cons to both. The Metro definitely offers the flexibility to just kind of go whenever you want.
Yeah, and especially like because it all connects one stop into the center of the whole like metro system, you could be staying in any of the neighborhoods, and it's all very accessible.
Yeah. So where have you stayed in Montreal?
So we were the Plateau Montreal when we were there. And then we ended up going downtown a lot or down to Old Montreal a lot, and kind of jumped around. And there was that picture of the sandwich on the prior slide, which it has my heart, but it's a Schwartz's that's up in Montreal. And I don't know if you've watched the Somebody Feed Phil Netflix show, but he goes in there and gets a sandwich because they've been around for, I want to say 100 some odd years. Don't quote me on that, but it's like a long time. There's so much historic food in the area.
Yeah, I had that place saved, but didn't make it. The things that I did kept eating is the poutine.
Okay.
Because there was just everywhere, and it was just easy. But I also stayed in Plateau Montreal, and it was probably about a 15-minute walk to the old port from where we stayed. We were kind of close to I want to say the university area, but overall it was a cool area to stay. It was a bit loud at night with clubs and bars and stuff, but staying close to one of the metro stops is kind of a good idea no matter where you stay, especially if you're trying to find accommodation now. As long as you're near a metro, and check the schedules to make sure that it's fairly reasonable. I think that there's some areas you can stay a little bit further, that you can still take the metro in, or if you have a car, they do have some parking rides around the city where you can drive, park somewhere, and then take the metro that will get you to and from the circuit. So that's another option.
Yeah, although like it's a very safe and accessible city, and Monaco obviously is very safe as well. But like here, Uber was very easy to get. We'd hop in and hop out if we had to go from A to point B, and so that's another option too if you don't want to worry about a car.
Yeah, and I guess it's something I didn't really touch on Monaco is that Monaco is really safe. I would feel completely comfortable traveling solo to attend that GP. And I feel like if you're a solo woman, I feel like I didn't really see anybody acting kind of weird or creepy. Everybody's really friendly. There's a lot of English. It's very international with French, Spanish, and Italian as well. And so I think communicating with people would be really easy. But using either the trains or if you have to take a taxi, I feel like there was small, like I want to say going to the casino and stuff. There was solo people who looked like they were going somewhere to meet people. And so I think that it's pretty reasonable to plan on attending Monaco solo. And for Montreal, I felt safe walking around at night. It seems it's kind of a North American city kind of grid, just urban area. But overall, I felt like it was pretty safe. It didn't have any weird vibes. I mean, there's plenty of people about like at all hours, early or late. I felt like it was completely reasonable to also attend solo. It just depends on where you stay is how the path can be. But I think if you're in the downtown area, you're going to have a lot of the university kind of people in that area. So they're just used to people walking around at all hours.
And how did you get to Montreal?
So we were flying in and out of Boston, but there was a ton of weather that week. All the flights were canceled for like several airports on the East Coast. We couldn't we're supposed to land in Boston Thursday night, and we're going to drive up with the intention on stopping at a brewery, Hill Farmstead Brewery in Vermont. That it's a bucket list place I've always wanted to go. I made this reservation a couple months in advance because it was reservation only at the time. And so our flight got canceled the night before. They put us on another flight Friday morning instead of Thursday afternoon. And we get to the airport. We're about to board our flight, and then our connection got canceled. And so we didn't board the flight, and we ended up catching they got us out of Boston. We got to Detroit, and then we ended up catching a flight to Hartford, Connecticut. And I was able to change the rental car and drive from there to Montreal. But we didn't get to Connecticut until like Friday night at like midnight or 1 a.m. And so picked up the rental car, drove for about an hour, and found a random hotel in New Hampshire. And so all our plans were just out the window.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Yeah, it sucked. Yeah. And so our trip that we had kind of packed some stuff in, some bucket list things we didn't get to do. And we ended up driving. We woke up early, drove from New Hampshire to Montreal Saturday morning, after, a few hours of sleep. And it was just pouring the entire time. And so I was like listening to Free Practice 3 while I was driving. And then we get to Montreal and we got checked into the Airbnb, dropped off the bags. And my wife was like, I'm not going. I'm exhausted. And so she just hung out at the apartment. And I ran to the metro basically and caught the metro to the circuit, got into the circuit, got to my seat right as the cars are coming out to qualify. And so my journey was supposed to start Thursday, but it didn't. Yeah, I didn't get to the circuit until Saturday afternoon. And it was just like rain the entire time.
So no one should take your advice for how to get there. And the right answer would have been just fly to the Montreal airport.
Yeah, and so that's the more reasonable thing to do. But I have a friend, Lucas from F1 Houston, who spent a lot of money on a flight to Montreal because that's another thing that surges aside from hotels, is flights.
Yeah.
And so that is expensive. And so that's where we have global entry. And so we can use the Century lines to cross the border for pretty easily. And so that was the plan. And the brewery we wanted to go to in Vermont is kind of remote. And so it was something that we wanted to do. And so we're doing that again this year, but we have a week instead of a long weekend. And
probably smarter with the Northeast weather in the summer.
Yeah. And so I haven't been up there a lot and I'm just unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, no, there's like Plattsburgh, I know, is another airport you could technically fly into. Burlington, Vermont is not too far. And so those are all options. But yeah, flying to Montreal, like when it's working, it's a super easy airport because it's only 25 minutes from downtown. You can take a car or you can take a bus and they're relatively affordable. Maybe 20, 25 CAD to get from the airport downtown. So it's a good option. But like you said, like the prices surge. And I've heard horror stories of Air Canada cost and just travel times and all of that for anyone who's a local or like a Canadian flying in. And then from the US, if you get a good flight, you just have to make sure it's on time.
I think it was about a 6-hour drive from Boston to Montreal total. Burlington is, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it's like 2 hours. That is probably the closest airport on the American side of the border that you can probably fly to for reasonably priced if the flights to Montreal are just ridiculous, because it all depends on where you're flying from too.
Right. Yeah. And you might be hard pressed if you're flying from really far to get a connect or to get a direct right into Montreal.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where it helps to kind of shop around and consider the price of rental car time and then another hotel if you need it, compared to just spending a little bit to just get the flight and be done with it.
Yeah. So anything else on the Montreal race that you think we should cover, or any questions from anyone who's watching, other than the Canadian Ollie's saying Air Canada is horrible, avoid it at all costs?
I used Air Canada to go to Italy a couple years ago.
Who's their airline partner?
It was Air Canada. We connected in Montreal and then flew from there to Rome.
No, but what airline do they partner with?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that's why it was an Air Canada plane that we used.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories, so avoid it.
Yeah, that's why I'm not sure who they're partnered with. But overall, that flight was good. We had a good trip because I ended up booking a flight from New York to Rome for really cheap with Air Canada. I think I paid like $430 round trip. And then we used points to get from here to New York. But yeah, it was funny though, because I used those points that we got to JFK, but the Air Canada flight was from LaGuardia.
To Rome?
From LaGuardia, Montreal, Rome.
Oh, sorry. The connect. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I piece together some stuff like that sometimes just to use points for one thing, but to save a ton of money.
Yeah,
And so we just have
but
some longer
JFK is
days.
not the most convenient.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was just they just got done with a bunch of construction, didn't they?
Yeah, they just renovated the whole Delta terminal. It's actually really nice.
Yeah, all that stuff was being built over there, so it was just chaos.
Yeah, it's coming together, which is surprising for that airport, but it's nice. I'm doing a flight back from Berlin to then go down to the Miami race, and I'm doing the JFK connection and staying in the airport because if I had to do LaGuardia, that would have been a nightmare.
Yeah. But overall, I think the Canadian GP is pretty. It can be reasonably priced. You just need to plan for it, and you need to plan for it like now if you want to go next year. Is start scouting places and try to get on the ticket email lists, as well as like as soon as the provisional calendar comes out, which is usually late summer, um, make book a hotel, book an Airbnb, which I know Airbnb isn't really recommended for Canada, especially after some recent incidents they've had. But book something that's either cancelable or refundable, just in case your plans fall through. But if you're considering going at all, reserve something ahead of time because the prices just jump. And while you're booking something, it's likely other people are going to be booking it too, so don't be surprised if it's gone by the time you hit confirm. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and if you don't see hotel inventory, one thing to do is to call and ask when they put it, like how far in advance. Because I know with Vegas, as an example, I think the Cosmopolitan was 10 months out, and so they had already announced the calendar, but that hotel in particular did not have any availability for quite a bit longer than their peers, and so that worked to your disadvantage because the prices would ultimately just be higher no matter what. But if you know in advance, you can at least try to get it the day it comes online.
Yeah, and that's really the best thing to do.
So what of these two, if you had to pick one, maybe to close us out, which one would you do?
I mean, it really depends on where you're coming from, but they're both kind of good staples on the calendar. The Canadian GP is kind of more known for some really good racing. There's been a couple dull ones in the last 10 years, but like there's some rained out ones like 2011, which is whenever Jenson Button came from last and won on the last lap. But that was like a 4-hour race in the rain, which just sounds, it was fun to watch on TV, but being there for 4 hours in the rain does not sound fun.
Yeah, I would have joined your wife and just hung out
there. Exactly. And so you just need to be prepared for it. But if I could pick one or the other, I would probably go with Canada just for better racing. It's not so far for me just because I'm in Austin. But the Monaco GP is awesome. I mean, it's just an experience. The racing itself isn't incredible, but being there is. And it's kind of one of those things where maybe it's better being there because you're not watching it on TV, and the TV production is Lance Stroll making the single overtake on the race. Yeah, and so I mean, they both have their pros and cons. If I was European based, there's ways to do the Monaco GP for pretty easy or reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, I think I'd pick Monaco. I just think the sort of whole Euro trip style ambiance to it, plus the fact that like what that city is and how absolutely stunning it is just being there in the harbor, even if it's not a race day, like it's just so cool. So
yeah, my wife definitely like she wants to go back to Monaco just to hang out for a week on a non-race week because one day we hung out on the beach, just had opened we got a bottle of wine from this one little restaurant and just hung out on the beach, got in the water, and just enjoyed the sun for a day. It's pretty cool. And that same beach that we were on, it's kind of one of the places where you're going to see F1 drivers using a running trail that's right behind it. And you're like, you're bound to bump into people at Monaco or see people that you see on TV or social media. I was at Izakaya Kaza, the restaurant across from Mozza, on the Monday after the GP, and Charles Leclerc just walked right up to me or behind me. My wife was like, "Charles Leclerc's right behind you," and I look, and it was him. And it turns out he was picking up his car. They were out there, like drinking with his friends after the race and having dinner, and he just left his car and went to go pick it up the next day. And he looked, yeah, and it you gonna bump into people like that. It's pretty cool.
I'm surprised you weren't going to say you were at his apartment, like all those people who were
And
showing
that
up.
sounds terrible. That's why he had to live around there, and especially if like it's his favorite restaurant and stuff that he had mentioned in those other videos. But yeah, that sounds terrible. Feel bad for that dude sometimes.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Well, I think we're going to start wrapping this up. Is there any other questions that you've seen on socials or FanNet?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know, answered.
All right, guys. Well, I guess that's it for today. We'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, and feel free to join us in the community for follow-ups to this. We'll do another session over the coming weeks for more races, and then for questions and group chats for the various races as they're coming up. We'll have one for Miami and for Imola and many more.
Yeah, feel free to message us with any feedback or anything as well.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we'll see you around.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye all.